Thank you, Sebastian, for joining us today.
Thank you for being here, Jeremy. Pleasure.
Incredible. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, could you tell us about yourself and your journey up to this point?
Well, that'd be a long story, but I'll try and make it brief. So I've studied quite a few different disciplines, and they're all sort of been converging towards the same goal, which is in many ways a celebration of our planet and nature in general. And this goes both into scientific studies and analytics, which is essentially what I do. I look at the environment as the center wheel that moving forward impacts every other systems on the planet, whether they be geopolitics or there be geoeconomics, technological, socio-political. All of these different facts of life are, as we've come to realize, are entirely dependent on a healthy balance of our system, our ecosystems, that is. So that's been really the core of my study. It's come from studying natural sciences and with a specific interest in glaciology. I'm a polar explorer, so I've spent a lot of times in the polar regions. I specialize mostly in the cold. And with that, there's been an athletic dimension to it, as well as a photographic dimension. And in many ways, those are the three columns that hold my house, if you will. There's science and analytics on the one hand, which invariably leads into advocacy. There is the aspirational aspect of athletics in the polar regions. And of course, I'm lucky enough to have some skills with a camera, which enables me to bring back some of these experiences that I have for not just others to share, but even just for me to relive.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. I've seen them and the books are absolutely incredible. And it's not a little skill, it's a huge skill. And for anyone who'd like to get a copy, how do they do that? Okay, well,
there's a little service provider called Amazon. I'm sure you must have heard of it. I think if you do just a simple Sebastian Copeland search, I've done 5 books. You'll find them. The latest one is called Polar Explorations. And it's published by Rizzoli with a foreword by Jimmy Chin. The one just before that, from 2 years ago, was called Antarctica, the Waking Giant, also with Rizzoli with a foreword by Leonardo DiCaprio. And I did another one where Sir Richard Branson was kind enough to give me a foreword, and another one where our late President Gorbachev did the introduction for another one. So all of my books are in the polar regions, by the way.
And I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you too. You're actually preparing a trip to Greenland. Can you tell me why that's so important and what are you actually going to do?
Yeah, so I leave actually tomorrow and I'll be in northern Greenland for 5 weeks. It's a trip that I've done on a regular basis. I was there at about the same time last year for about the same duration. And it's an ongoing project of both monitoring local conditions at the time where the transformation between the winter freeze and the summer melt is really at its most vivid. And so I both monitor glaciers within a fjord region in the very, very northern part of Greenland. And I stay with local communities. I was embedded last year for 3 weeks with a little community in Kekatat, with only 12 people, a community that's entirely based on hunting and fishing. And part of my work is also the sociological element. How is climate change impacting culture, way of life, sociology and whatnot. So this is part of a 10-year project that I've been undertaken for the last 8 years or so.
Fantastic, Sebastian. So thank you. So let's get into the real heart of the matter. I mean, people have just found out that you've devoted your life to the issues of understanding how our planet is behaving as a consequence of our own behaviour. Where are we? I mean, where is the world right now in relation to protecting the air, land and sea?
Well, that's a big question, and if there's one thing that all three of these elements have in common is that they're in crisis. There's no question that the human impact on our ecosystems is having a profound negative impact on its ability to resource, to regenerate. And in the process, we're losing countless species. We're in fact, as scientists have pointed out for some time now, in the sixth mass extinction event. Now, there's been 5 mass extinction events since, the beginning of our planet 4.5 billion years ago. In fact, not that long, because the reality is life really started to explode on this planet about 581 million years ago. And, some mass extinction events have seen up to 96% of species wiped out. And right now we're seeing what is estimated to be about 70% of species that have disappeared since the 1970s. And so we're fundamentally asleep at the wheel. And this, by the way, is impacting everything from land to oceanic life. And, there are 2 narratives going on in parallel. The first one is more and more sophisticated science that is giving us a deeper understanding of the behavior of these different ecosystems and how they react to encroachment, overfishing, destruction of our ecosystems for agricultural development, urban and otherwise. And of course, with the impact of carbon dioxide and different greenhouse effects that are being poured into the atmosphere and are therefore impacting both climate and meteorology. So, the story is a pretty simple one. We've grown over the course of the last 175,000 years or so, since anatomically modern humans have adapted to walking on 2 legs and being resourceful, and always without really a great sense of philosophical or I'll come to say scientific understanding of our impact on the planet. We sort of went happy-go-lucky, got our needs. There was a spiritual element for very, very long time where indigenous species still cultivate that very deep sense of connection, spiritual connection with our planet. But in reality, as we developed as a species, and particularly as we started to see ourselves as the top of the food chain, and this came from the Age of Enlightenment, where we sort of thought of ourselves as in God's image and the chosen species. Well, from that moment on, we also developed our intellectual capabilities, our engineering capabilities, and in doing so, we started to have more and more of an impact on our planet. And that's really when the wheels started to fall off the wagon. And of course, about 200 years ago, when we realized that a carbon molecule would essentially optimize our energy outputs and generating essentially what was going to be a much better quality of life, which it has done. Let's not discount the fact that carbon energy has greatly improved the quality of life for humans. Unfortunately, unchecked, it's also done enormous damage to the planet. So here we are now with a much greater understanding of where we stand, all the science to back it up. And now really we're battling the old habits of greed, if you will, and special interests who are bent on maintaining what has turned out to be a very profitable type of industries, even whilst they are very destructive for the planet present and, of course, future.
Thanks, Sebastian. I mean, incredible. So therefore, the big question has to be, what has humanity got to do to get through this crisis? And even more importantly, do you think we're capable of turning this around?
Well, again, I don't have a crystal ball on this. I'm purely in analytics, so I can see where the technological improvements are going and what they're doing. And in truth, this has been nothing short of remarkable. I think that, the human engineering remains extraordinarily visionary and capable. I don't really doubt that we have the capability of turning this around. Like most people in my field, I'm very worried about the timeline. It just feels like we're, catching up to a crisis just at the cusp, and perhaps even a little too late to avoid the worst of it. And when I say the worst of it, it's of course it's cataclysmic in many different systems, but we'll manage to carry on for long periods of time. The problem is at what cost? And, that cost is going to come at, in the dimensions of sociopolitics and geopolitics. There will be more and more people who will simply not be able to sustain themselves where they are. We've presently lost about 1% of inhabitable lands in the last 30 years for humans. By the end of the century, that number will be up to 17%, meaning that, the belt that sort of moves away from the equator, both south and north, regions like the Sahel, let's say from Mali to Somalia and to Bangladesh, etc. Well, you literally have 1.5 billion people who live within that region. And by the end of the century, these people will be seeking a new place of living because it'll be simply unsustainable for them to stay where they are. The big question is, what will that do to sociopolitics and, of course, to geopolitics? Generally speaking, these things don't come peacefully. And what we're seeing develop in politics, generally speaking, around the world is more and more of a sense that it's entrenched in fear, the fear that they're losing identity, losing potential work. I think populations in general are insecure, and they have good reasons to be. We've got artificial intelligence that's coming in as a potential predator and an apex predator at that, threatening the very existence of human lives as we understand them. I mean, let's not mince our words. I think artificial intelligence unchecked is as dangerous as nuclear weapons. And so, with that, we also have a movement of people, migrants, whether they be the result of wars. Many of these wars started because of climate crisis and hydrology that's diminishing their ability to sustain agriculture and whatnot. And so there are more and more of these refugees seeking a place of solace. And people have a tendency, because of their fear, to want to close their doors and build walls. And of course, we understand that walls always get breached eventually. And so we really need to rethink systemically, not just the way in which we operate, economically and industrially, but also in the way that we operate philosophically relative to fellow humans.
Thank you, Sebastian. Incredible. So it leads us to the final question, which clearly has to be, if people would like to support you, how can they best do that? Actually, that's number one. And the second thing that I want to ask you is, what do we all have to do in our own lives?
Right. I'm going to start with the second one first, because I think it's important. The global economy is now only about 7.2% that is circular. And that is down from 9.1% just a few years ago, 5 years ago. Circularity is essentially closing the loop in waste, as I'm sure you understand. And in 1972, the Club of Rome had warned that we should limit our global extraction of materials to about 26.8 gigatons of material. We double that in 30 years and double that again 20 years later. And today in 2023, we extract about 105 gigatons of materials. And that situation globally is getting worse year on year, driven by material extraction and use. And it leaves a huge circularity gap, which is essentially that the globe almost exclusively relies on virgin materials that they take, they make, and then they waste. And this means that, in building machineries and long-lasting stocks, such as building, all of these materials are locked in. And we need to really rethink this, because in nature, there is no waste. Nature is not wasteful. And if there's one thing that we could really learn from, it is from nature, because nature does, at its best, a regenerative job, and where everything is reintroduced into its ecosystem. So we actually have within our capabilities, of course, there are all the issues of reducing our carbon footprint and decarbonization, which I think we're doing a generally fairly good job at. We're moving certainly in mobility, e-mobility presently, which will be at some point replaced probably with hydrogen components. But we've got to really understand what the agri-food, mobility and transport, manufactured goods and consumables are doing to the planet. And I think The solutions are quite simple. There are 4 circular actions. One is use less, use longer, reuse, and make clean. And if we can apply this to the food industry, because so much of that food is being wasted, and it also generates 40% of global emissions. And then in the built environment where 30% of greenhouse gases are produced, there's also a lot that we can do in reducing that. And of course, the other is the goods and consumable. We are addicted to consumerism. This is what we do the best. And we've optimized it so much that we make clothes that cost far less in the store than what their actually impact and cost really does represent. And we're addicted to these cheap, basically expendable pieces of product, and particularly in the fashion industry. So I think all of these are some of the elements in the circular economy that I believe we really need to address. The earth is biology, chemistry, and physics. That's it. Everything happens within those confines. If you impact what happens within that, the things transform. And unfortunately, as we're seeing these species extinct at the rate of 70%, as I've mentioned earlier in the conversation, since the 1970s, it begs the question, where do we fit within those statistics? And I think the prospects are bleak if we don't act, and we need to act now.
If people want to support you, how can they best do this?
One of the bright side of social media, because, God knows we all understand some of the, the dangers of it. But social media can also afford enormous amount of information that can be digested in a quick time. So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm on Copeland Adventures. And I post pretty regularly on various topics that all pertain to the subject that we've discussed today. Short of that, I have a foundation called the Sedna Foundation, where we basically report from the front lines of climate change in the polar regions. This is really the canary in the coal mine, although I think that analogy has essentially lost a bit of its luster, because there's no more a canary. We understand that the problems are there. But being informed and curious and affecting your way of life is the best gift that you could give me or anyone, to be perfectly frank, because this is an all hands on deck moment in our experience on this planet. As Marshall McLuhan's once said, there are no passengers on planet Earth, only crew. And that means that we all have a part in this, whether we vote with our wallets or we vote at the ballot box. But most importantly is to be informed, to fight the disinformation propaganda campaigns, and to try and really understand that we live in a system that we rely on, and we cannot simply plunder it and expect that it will provide for us forever, because that simply is not the case. It's not the case in nature, and it's not the case in human life.
Sebastian Copeland, thank you so much for participating in Climate Action Live. I'm humbled to know you, and I really wish you the very best on your next expedition. Good luck on behalf of everybody watching. Thanks for the amazing things you do. Good luck, mate.
Jeremy, you're a hero. What you do, you've committed your life to peace on earth. It is absolutely extraordinary. Year in, year out, we've been friends for a long time, and I have nothing but admiration for what you guys are doing, and for you personally driving this engine. So congratulations. We keep fighting, and we'll get to the top of it. The reality is the future is bright if we work at it. And I think that's what I want to leave it to it. We can't be complacent. We will be relying on technology, but also on politics. And we have a play in that. We buy and we vote. So let's get to work.
Amazing, Sebastian. Thank you so much. Good luck, mate.